when the platform was still a place, a phenomenon of early digital presence. Observing how digital presence behaved before optimization replaced continuity. Written by Red Cardinal Kitchen, The Illumination of a Dynamic Archive. This record is preserved as an observation, not an argument. It does not seek to restore what has passed, nor to critique what followed. It documents a posture, how early digital presence behaved before optimization reshaped continuity, tone, and relational pace. What is recorded here is not a platform. It is a way of being together across distance. Before optimization introduced urgency, before partnership models redefined attention, digital entry felt less like activation and more like arrival. To encounter a video was to step into an ongoing moment. Nothing prepared you, nothing attempted to hold you. You were not summoned, you were allowed. There was a time when entering the platform felt less like clicking a video and more like arriving somewhere, as though the act itself carried weight, as though one stepped across a threshold instead of pressing a button. Nothing asked for attention, nothing reached forward or announced itself, and nothing attempted to prepare you for what you were about to see. A person appeared already mid-thought, already living inside their moment, as if you had come in through a side door and taken a seat without being noticed. You were not greeted, and you were not persuaded, and no one tried to explain why you should stay. There was no sense of performance beginning, no visible tightening of posture or voice. You were allowed, and that permission was quiet enough that it took time to recognize it as such. The cameras were still because they had nowhere else to be, resting on shelves or balanced on books, pointed forward simply because that was where the room happened to open. Lighting came from windows in the afternoon, from lamps pulled close at night, from overhead bulbs that hummed faintly when the house settled. Nothing was corrected or softened, and nothing was framed with intention beyond what was already present. Sound arrived unevenly, sometimes thin, sometimes close, sometimes distant enough to feel like memory, but it carried breath and pauses and the small hesitations that come from thinking out loud. You could hear someone searching for the next word, or deciding whether to say it at all. Those pauses were not mistakes, they were evidence of a person still inside themselves. You were not an audience in the way the word would later come to mean, and you were not treated as something to be gathered or held. You were a witness, arriving quietly and remaining so. People spoke the way they spoke at home, without projection and without rehearsal, letting their voices fall where they may. They talked about the day, not because it mattered, but because it had happened. They talked about their past, not because it carried weight, but because it was close at hand. Confusion and joy sat beside each other without explanation, allowed to exist without resolution. Sometimes they cooked, moving slowly, stopping to taste, forgetting the camera was there long enough for something to burn slightly at the edges. Sometimes they sang, not to be heard, but because the song had arrived and needed a place to pass through. Sometimes they dressed as someone else, not to deceive or to perform, but to see what it felt like to step sideways into another shape. When performance appeared, it felt theatrical rather than strategic, closer to play than persuasion. You could sense when someone was experimenting instead of presenting. You always knew who you were with, even when they were pretending to be someone else. Time moved differently then, not because it was slower, but because it was unmeasured. If you clicked, you stayed, not because you were held in place, but because nothing pushed you away. The opening moments did not hurry, and they did not attempt to justify themselves before they had begun. There was no sense that you were being evaluated, and no sense that your patience was being tested. The video did not try to prove its worth in the first breath. It trusted that if you were there for a reason. There was no urgency embedded in the opening seconds, no tightening of language, no sudden lift in tone meant to catch a wandering mind. Nothing counted down, nothing teased what was coming next, and nothing attempted to hold you hostage to curiosity. The record did not rush to explain itself or to defend its existence. It unfolded at the speed of thought, which is slower than excitement and faster than silence. You were not asked to lean forward, and you were not warned that something important was about to happen. You were simply allowed to remain where you were. Watching did not feel like consumption, and it did not carry the faint sense of extraction that would come later. It felt like sitting in a room where someone trusted you enough not to entertain you. Sometimes nothing happened at all, and no one felt compelled to fill the space. The room breathed, and the person inside it breathed with it. Time passed without being shaped into progress. That passing was the content. Someone stirred a pot, slowly, distracted by a thought that had arrived halfway through the motion. Someone paused to think, eyes drifting away from the camera as if the answer might be waiting somewhere else in the room. Someone laughed quietly, not for effect, but because something had amused them in a way that did not require witnesses. They continued without apology, without resetting the moment. Those pauses were not edited out because they were the point. They proved that nothing was being rushed toward an outcome. What mattered was not polish, because polish would have implied distance. What mattered was not clarity, because clarity would have required explanation. What mattered was continuity, the sense that you had arrived in the middle of something that did not exist for you alone. The record did not bend itself around your presence. You adjusted to it, not the other way around. That adjustment felt natural rather than demanded. When partnership arrived, the posture changed, quietly at first, as though no one wished to notice the movement while it was still small. Presence stopped being enough, and something else began to be required, though it was not yet named. Openings tightened, voices lifted, and moments learned to announce themselves. Attention became something to earn, to hold, to prove. The room began to rearrange itself around the imagined viewer. The record no longer waited to be entered. Openings shifted from invitations to thresholds, from doors left ajar to gates that asked to be passed. Language learned to hurry ahead of content, clearing space before the moment could arrive on its own. Excitement appeared early, sometimes before anything had happened at all. The camera began to anticipate instead of observe. Faces arranged themselves to signal reaction rather than feeling. The stillness learned to apologize for itself. The viewer was no longer assumed to be patient or perceptive. The viewer was assumed to be fleeting, distracted, already halfway elsewhere. The record learned to call out rather than wait. Nothing cruel had occurred, and nothing had been taken away deliberately. The system simply became efficient. Efficiency replaced trust without ever announcing the exchange. This was not a loss of creativity, and it was not the disappearance of talent or imagination. It was a loss of ambient humanity, the background hum that once made room feel inhabited. Early digital presence behaved like conversation across distance, loose and unfinished. Later digital presence behaved like broadcast, shaped to reach rather than to share. One assumed trust, the other demanded attention. Live video attempted to recover immediacy, but even live became scheduled, framed, and shaped for reaction. The moment learned to arrive on cue. Presence became a feature rather than a condition, something to be activated and measured. Homes remained visible, and kitchens remained visible, but they felt staged in a way they had not before. You could see the room without being inside it. The permission to linger quietly became rare. What was lost cannot be restored by imitation, and copying the surface does not recover the depth. Grainy video alone does not bring back presence. Informality used as style does not restore trust. What can be restored is posture, the way a record holds itself in relation to those who encounter it. A record can still behave like a place. A video can still allow entry instead of interruption. A narrator can still speak as if the listener is sitting nearby, not as if they must be convinced to stay. The voice can remain where it is instead of reaching forward. This does not require rejecting the system that now exists. It requires not allowing that system to dictate tone. The difference is subtle and easy to miss. It is felt rather than announced. Those who arrived later did not miss content. They missed a way of being together. They missed the quiet permission to stay without being sold to listen without being hurried, to witness without being managed. Some archives choose to remember that posture deliberately, not as resistance, but as continuity. A platform may become a marketplace, but a record can still behave like a room with the lights on low. When it does, something old becomes briefly visible again, the feeling that you are not watching something, but being allowed to be there. This video is presented as part of the archive. It records an observation of early digital presence and how continuity, tone, and shared attention function before optimization reshaped platform behavior and maintained for long-term archival reference. Some records are kept not to explain the past, but to remember how it felt. Red Cardinal Kitchen, the illumination of a dynamic archive.